Hard to believe that it's week 4 already of college football, but that means we're getting some exciting matchups. We're going to see some conference games that are going to have big implications for teams in their college football playoff performance as well as their quest. And Tennessee and Oklahoma are two of those teams, two teams that are coming into this game with very different outlooks, very different perspectives of how this season has gone. And Tennessee has been absolutely dominant. Now, you could question the quality of opponent that they played, but they did dominate an NC State team that, while they're not as good as they once were, it's still a solid team to be able to do that too. And you're looking at a Tennessee team that's playing with a ton of confidence, primarily because of their offense, but their defense is also playing extremely well, averaging nearly 64 points per game, which part of that has to do, again, with the quality of opponent they're playing. And now we get a chance to see what they'll do against a team like Oklahoma. Now, the Sooners are coming into this game a little bit different in terms of confidence. They have had some struggles, specifically the Houston game when they only won 16-12. And they've also had some inconsistent play, though you've seen some flashes of what they're capable of doing. Now, facing a team like Tennessee is much more difficult than it has been in the past, and it's going to be a difficult test for the Sooners. Now, this is an Oklahoma team that looked pretty good against Tulane last week, so we're going to figure out real quick which team we get from them. This is a game in which Tennessee is a 7.5 point favorite, and that is going to be an indication right now of where these two teams are at. Now, again, Tennessee probably would be higher had they beaten some better opponents, but in this case, they just haven't. But a 7.5 point spread says something about these two teams. Oklahoma leads this series 3-1. So they haven't played a ton, but you probably expect that number to go up. Obviously, now that Oklahoma is in the SEC, and you're getting your first glimpse of what the Sooners can do in this conference this year. And a big question for them is, can they prove that they belong? You're going to get some questions. And this is when you came into the preseason, you thought Oklahoma was going to probably coast to 8 wins with how much talent they had returning. And so far, that has not been the case. And that's, again, not against SEC competition. So that's probably a big question. However, it's the beginning of the season. I think that there has to be a grain of salt taken with some of the struggles as well as some of the success. So both sides definitely have had their struggles at times. And one of the things that Oklahoma can do is be disruptive. I think one of the things that Penn State did well, which there weren't many, and I wouldn't even say that they did it well, but there were times where Kent State was disruptive. They had Tennessee's offensive line kind of in a bind because they were being so explosive on the defensive line, and Oklahoma has the defensive line that could do some damage. So keep an eye on that. That's a matchup that will be interesting to watch. But the real big matchup is going to be what Oklahoma secondary can do against Tennessee's wide receivers, but also what they can do against Nico Iamaleava. He is someone who is having a big year, but also has had, I think, some mental lapses. There's also some things that Oklahoma can get him into tough situations and make him uncomfortable. I think throwing on the run so far has been kind of all over the place for Nico. He's made some really nice throws and some incredible throws at that. But he's also made some throws that make you scratch your head. So Oklahoma definitely has opportunities to turn him over. They have opportunities to get things done up front. So it's not that Tennessee's invincible, but it's going to be difficult. For Tennessee, can they dominate the game again? This has been an absolute monster performance through 3 games. Tennessee's offense under Josh Heupel has been really explosive and really exciting. And this is maybe their best team in his tenure. Again, it's only 3 games in, so you have to, again, take it with a grain of salt. This is a Tennessee team that has the college football playoff on its mind. And right now, I think if you had to ask a majority of people, they would pick Tennessee, but that's why you play the game. Again, there are things that Tennessee must shore up. I think the rushing attack's fine. The passing attack, when Nico's making smart decisions, is very explosive, and they have lots of options. But there's also some questions. Again, Kent State, which is going to be a terrible team this year, they were disruptive at times. Now, I know that you're going to look at this box score and say, well, they lost by a ton. Yes, they did. But there were times where they made some disruptive plays and multiple plays in a row where they were disruptive. Now, again, Tennessee was explosive, and that really has to do with more of a talent gap. But when you're facing a better team like in Oklahoma that has better defensive linemen, they are going to find ways to do that. So keep an eye on that and keep an eye on what Nico can do against that secondary. The players for watch, to watch for Oklahoma, the impact players, Deion Burks just has to get going. There's a reason why you brought him in to campus and bring him to this offense. And so far, it has had times where it's been fun, but also you're kind of scratching your head as to when he's going to actually showcase his explosiveness on a consistent basis. Now, if you have a healthy group of receivers, if you have Burks, if you have certain guys like Nick Anderson, I think that you're looking at a much different offense. Jackson Arnold is going to be the focus. He is going against a Tennessee defense that wants to be disruptive. Guys like James Pierce have been phenomenal so far this year, and he is going to have a tough time getting the ball out if his offensive line isn't up for the task. Now, some of that is on him, some of that is on the offensive line. So keep an eye on that, and we will see exactly what Jackson Arnold can do against SEC competition. And that's really exciting if you're an Oklahoma fan. Now, maybe you're going to see some bumps along the way, but you also know that you have talent as long as it's healthy that can make that happen. The defense is also going to have their hands full. So guys like Danny Stutzman right now, as they're studying film, he is someone that is going to be a leader. He is going to have to figure out what can we do against this offense. And he is someone that's going to be a tough spot because of the wide splits that Tennessee uses. He is going to have to really dictate who is going to be in the box, who's going to have to widen out, and how that helps them versus gets them out of the position. The defensive backfield is also going to be tested. So guys like Billy Bowman and his experience are going to come up big. The corners are going to be tested. Again, this is a really good passing attack and a really unique offense. So finding ways to defend this with some efficiency is key. And then we talked about the defensive line. Guys like Ethan Downs are going to have to figure out how do we get the rest of this group to be disruptive? Because again, there were times if you go back and watch the film that Tennessee got beat by inferior talent. And this is a team that has equal talent, if not better, at certain positions than Tennessee. And you're going to see if they can find ways to be disruptive. That's probably the biggest thing at the line of scrimmage for both sides. If Oklahoma can protect Jackson Arnold, you feel fairly good about what this team could do. And the same thing for the defense side of the ball. If this defensive line is being disruptive, Tennessee could be in for a long night or just one that they have to struggle through a little bit more. Now, the impact players for Tennessee, everything starts with Nico. Shouldn't be a surprise. 525 yards, 5 touchdowns, thrown a couple picks. So there's been some inconsistencies with his game so far, but overall, the overarching theme is that he's been pretty exciting as a passer. Also, a solid runner, 71 yards on the ground, as well as 3 touchdowns. So he is someone who is a dual threat that they want to obviously see his arm do more of the damage. And you can easily see why when you go back and watch the film. He's really fun to watch. Joining him in the backfield, Dylan Sampson has been really good so far. I think he's kind of an unsung hero for this team. And the rushing attack in general, I think, has been really good. Last week, an absolute dominant performance by that rushing attack, and that's going to help this week as well. Finding ways to be absolute dominant against Oklahoma's defense, specifically running the football, is going to open things up for this offense even more as if they needed help. And that's going to be something to keep an eye on. Nico is obviously very talented as a passer, but if the guys around him and the offensive line are dominating up front and that rushing attack is doing damage, you feel like you're in good hands. Dont'e Thornton has been really explosive at times. I think that the wide receiver group is very fun to watch. Squirrel White, Brew McCoy, Dont'e Thornton is just a handful of guys that are going to be really fun to watch when this game presents itself. And it's a big matchup that, again, has big implications for both teams. So keep an eye on that. The defense is really the X factor, though. When you look at Oklahoma's offense hasn't exactly been consistent, nor has it really struck fear in anybody that is going to play them in the future. So you obviously don't want to take anyone lightly, but this is where Tennessee needs to be dominant. Yes, you can probably sit back and think, okay, well, we're probably fine because they're not exactly the most dominant team. However, Oklahoma has the ability to be explosive. I don't think that you can sit back and take them lightly, nor do I think Tennessee will do that. So guys like Arion Carter are going to have to play a big role, especially because up front, I feel like Tennessee's group up front feels like they're in good hands. But then also on the secondary, guys like Jermon McCoy, that secondary is going to have their hands full because they have guys like Deion Burks, because you have certain players that can make life a little bit more challenging than your average team. And again, this is probably the best team so far. Probably would say this is the best team so far that Tennessee will have played, and it's going to be the most difficult challenge for them. So we'll see how well they can handle it. And if you're looking to predict this game, I think most people outside of Norman, Oklahoma are picking Tennessee to win. It's a 7.5 point line. But again, like I mentioned before, there are things that Oklahoma can do to pull off this upset.